John Israel. Now, John, do you go by Izzy? Is that the or is that only for like cool kids and friends that know you really well?
Oh, it's usually a second date, second Zoom date. So.
Okay, we're gonna keep it. We're gonna keep it, John. We're gonna keep it, John. So John is professional speaker, author. He's a founder of a really, really cool project that I'm gonna let him tell you more about. And the reason we're having amazing guests like John on that have something that can make a difference for families is in this connection series. We launched Family Brand because we believe that every family can decide what it is they stand for. Every family can decide what it is they want to be known for by creating their family's brand. No differently than like an entrepreneur or an organization would, but often as families, we don't do it. And what we believe is that when a family creates their brand of what it is they stand for and what it is they're known for, that not only will they create an intentional culture that can really bless the lives of their family now, but that it has the ability to create a foundation that could impact family for generations to come. And the reason this is so important to Melissa and I, my wife, and we have 5 children, was because like this is exactly what we did to really save our marriage and create the family culture that we have now that we're striving to live intentionally. And John is, again, a speaker, author, founder of the Mr. Thank You Project, and so successful entrepreneur in his own right. And so, John, I'm curious from your perspective, have you found that it's easier as an entrepreneur in your career, in your business? Is it easier at times to be more intentional with that than it is like your own family?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. You had said something that I feel really rang true, and we can just we can go deep from the beginning here, but
Let's jump into the deep into the swimming pool.
Yeah, you just had said something that triggered an experience that I had in my marriage that was like kind of a big shifting point. So I'm a keynote speaker, so I work really hard in my craft, to get on stage, deliver quality message, really be impactful with the audience and the people who are investing in my presence at the conference or events. And I put a lot of intentionality around that. And my wife and I were having a deep dive session into our marriage and our life and our family. And she had said something that just really rocked my world. And she said, you spend so much of your time taking the stage in your business, and I just really wish that you would take the stage in your family. And that to me was like, wow. She just spoke, and we have a good marriage, by the way. I feel really good about our relationship, and to a degree where she could say that and I wouldn't take offense to it. I really was like, kind of a call forward in leadership. And but she was right, like it's so much easier to work with the variables of like customers and client retention and than it is like with like child retention. I mean, they're children, they're toddlers, they're crazy. Think there's so many dynamics that are uncontrollable. So it's easy to be like, well, that's just always going to be there, right? I'm married, I have kids, they're always going to be my kids. I'm always going to be married. It's easy to just assume that, but you can even relate that to any business. The moment you assume that is the moment that you start to lose relevance. Wow. And then as soon as we lose relevance, we lose impact, we lose leadership. And so that for me was like kind of a starting point for starting to take my marriage and our relationship and my experience as a father much more seriously. And so we've developed some systems and things like that we do to help work on our family brand. So when I heard about what you were doing, I was like, yeah, that's really cool. We've done. I'm curious actually to learn more about that. We've done something for our own family, but yeah, that's I would agree with you 100% on that statement.
Man, thank you for sharing. For those of you just tuning in or watching us live, so first of all, if you're watching live, you can see underneath the video, it says start a watch party. I would invite you guys, please start a watch party. It's even more impactful than sharing a live video, I've learned recently, because when you start a watch party, you literally go live, just like we're going live on this page, you go live on your page. Please start a watch party. I promise you what we're going to share is going to make a difference for husbands and wives and couples and partners and families. Like the Family Brand page, follow the Connection series, and what John just shared, just the whole interview is worth it already. And what John just shared, successful author, successful speaker, keynote speaker, and in with his commitment to make a difference for people out speaking on stages. And his wife said, hey, like, just like you take the stage so powerfully and so intentionally in your business, I want you to start taking the stage in our family. And it's like, Dude, those moments though, like when you
Yeah.
have the ultimate call out by someone that loves you, right? It's like this very
Yeah.
street. I'm looking at the street we're walking on that changed my life when my wife one night years ago, when I'm complaining about my situation and my business and trying to support other business owners. And after like 2 nights of complaining on these walks, my wife just looks at me and she's like, when are you going to start when are you going to start building your own dream and start chasing other people's? And I was like, wow. It's like almost in those moments when you get that ultimate call out, you're almost like, did someone
Yeah.
say something?
Yeah. Wives are good at that.
Yeah, it's amazing. But it's like, but part of that speaks to this very thing, John, of like some homes and some families, the culture that's been created, you would never feel safe to actually say those kinds of things. Right. It's like one of the things that we're really big on, like one of our family values is Smiths can talk about anything without judgment. And it's like, man, can we really do that? Like, what would that really be like for any member of the family, any child, any husband, any wife, like anyone to be able to go to someone else and share anything, like no matter how difficult or how challenging or how confronting it is, can we really talk about anything? And so I love that you said like, and luckily we have the kind of relationship where we can say those types of things to each other. Wow, what an amazing kickoff here to the interview with John. So John, I have 4 questions I'm going to ask you. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to share what's the first thing that comes to mind for you, and then I want to get into the Thank You Project and what you do and how it could, make a difference for some of the families and entrepreneurs watching today. And maybe you and your wife have put intentional language to this, or it's been conversations you've had. But first question I ask all my guests is, what do you? And I know it's a big question, so no, don't overthink it. No right or wrong. What do you want to be known for as a family? Like if someone were to speak about the Israels, like out there in the world, it's like, what would you want to be known for as your family?
Yeah. The I believe leadership and independent thinking. We homeschool our kids, and so we have a real belief of being, everyone I think is homeschooling, whether they realize it or not. Your kids are only at school for a certain number of hours a day. There's still opportunities
Right.
for learning every time they come home. So I think for us, we really instill a lot of independent thinking and figuring things out on their own. And so we really want our kids to be that type of leader in the world. But the other piece of that I would just say is leaders. Like that's who the Israels are. We've created our, so we have our name Israel. So we put an acrostic to it. So I stands for integrity, S stands for service, R stands for relationships, A is abundance, E is entrepreneurship, and L is leadership. And so one of the recent things we started doing is during dinner time, I made like just a poster, nothing fancy. It's just like, kids art paper. And I just wrote the name as an acrostic. And every day, one of the things that we do is we just discuss like, how did you see someone in our family showing up as one of our values? And I think that's, whatever it would be that our kids show up in the world that other people perceive, I would love to see it be one of those values.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Like that's cool. That intentionality. And because one of the things that we talked about with the last guest that I had on the Connection series, David Bayer, we talked about this idea that you have values in your home, whether you've stated them or not. So sometimes the values you have in your home is because like they're unintentionally created and they don't serve your family, but they're still values. That's still a culture. But we have this opportunity to actually intentionally create a culture and values that will really serve us, like what you guys have done with your last name. I love that. Okay. So, what do you want to be known for? Leadership, but also any one of those values, right?
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit different questions, kind of like that idea of like, what do you want to be known for out there? It's like, what would you say if you had to say it in one word? And maybe it is leadership, but what would you say if I was like, John, what do the Israels stand for? More than anything, like, what do you guys stand for in the world?
Hmm. Good question. Good thing you didn't tell me to prepare. Or at least for these questions, I have other stuff obviously to talk about. But what do we stand for? I think that we stand for. We really stand for relationship, and we have taken it. And this is much love to my wife for developing this. And when I hear her how she does she uses what's called Charlotte Mason teaching. So Charlotte Mason was a homeschool philosophy type person in the early 1900s, and one of the things that she talks about is like the relationships that matter most are the ones that are closest to you. And with our children, I've heard my wife say, we have a 5.5-year-old, a 3.5-year-old boy, 2 boys, and then we have a 8-month-old girl. But when we had 2 boys, my wife would always say to the older one, hey, no matter who you try to think of as friends out there, Roan, your brother, he is your first friend. He is your best friend. And if you can't be friends with your brother, you can't be friends with people out there. So it's really like, I think that has been a real test to also then how that relationship has grown, and also how he, shows up in relationship with other people. Because I think that's really important, how we treat each other in your family unit really says a lot in how you might show up in developing relationships outside your family. And
Totally.
that's relationships, I would say, is what I would like for us to be known for.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's our 8-year-old daughter and our 5-year-old son recently, like just like all little kids, they have those moments where they just are just bickering and fighting. Like, it's just like, what's gotten into you guys the last few days? And so we finally just like, same thing where it's like, hey, look, you guys can't go play with your friends and neighbors if you can't like play with each other, right? If we can't be kind to each other in this thing called a family unit and be friends, right? So I love that. So, okay, what do we want to be known for? Leadership. What do we stand for? Relationships. What type of culture, because what's interesting is there's these things that we stand for and we want to be known for, our values and our maybe our mission, our vision, but then there's the type of culture that we're creating in our home, right? Like this culture of where we create this space. What would you say is like you and your wife, like what kind of culture do you guys try to foster and create in your home? Like, I mean, I know there's this like free thinking and the homeschool and like.
Yeah, I think that the culture is curiosity. Curiosity with just like, oh, well, why do you feel that way? Or what's interesting to you about that? Or, hey, did you notice that over there? Why do you think that's happening? And I think with that culture of curiosity, it's really good for us as parents, because it calls you to, like, if something's happening, it's like instead of being like assumptive or judgmental, right? It's being able to be like curious of like, oh, why is he acting that way? Why is he behaving that way? Did he just hit his brother? What does he need right now? So I think really a culture of curiosity before judgment. Well, definitely not being perfect at that. I feel that we have a real culture of that.
That's awesome. And what I love about curiosity is it's multiple. Like if you can come from a place of curiosity, again, when someone does something that you don't enjoy in any situation in life, if you can come from a place of curiosity of like, oh, what has you say that? Or what has you do that? Man, it's even if inside you want to like really get frustrated and mad and you're feeling that, it helps you feel like or appear that you're responding instead of reacting. But also I love this idea of a culture of curiosity, of teaching your kids like, hey, be curious about things. Like be curious about like different types of things. And if there's something that calls to you or something you want to learn about, like, we promote this idea of like your path might be completely different than mine, but whatever you're curious about, right? It's actually one of the things too. We have a sales training that we teach in the Campfire Effect, which, for those of you watching, I have a business called the Campfire Effect that we took our family through to create our family brand. And one of the things that I teach John, one of the greatest things you can do in sales when someone has an objection is be curious about it. Like if you tell someone your price and they're like, wow, that's expensive. It's like, oh, that's interesting. What has you say that? It's like, so this place of curiosity really, like, it really is the antithesis, like you said, of judgment. So I love that. Okay. So what we want to be known for is leadership. What we stand for is relationships, and we're creating a culture of curiosity. And the power of that too, I want to say, is like, that's one of the things that we actually want every family to put language to, because there's just that much higher of a probability that you will pass that on, right? That it's not just implied, but it's like it's spoken. Last question, John. What's worked for your guys' family? I mean, this is called the Connection series. What's really worked for you guys to create connection, maybe as husband and wife, and then as your family? Like what really are activities or things or just that has you guys like feel connected as a family?
Yeah. I think we have a really clear schedule. And it definitely took a while to get there. A really clear schedule of who's on, who's off, and when are we all
Totally.
on. And so that once we got to that space, it really removed a lot of upset or feeling of like, because in a marriage, and people are in different spaces where, for some places, the wife does work out of the house, some of them not. Although in this moment when we're recording this, I think everyone's working at home. But I think that we really spent a lot of time on just like noticing the upset in our life and just like when things just weren't working well. And it's usually because somebody wasn't getting a need met. They weren't getting the time they needed, right? So for my wife, for a while, as an entrepreneur, I can work all day, every day, and earn. At the same time, there's a cost because then she's with the kids all day, and I'm disconnected from the kids, and then we're disconnected because I'm working a lot, and then it just becomes tumultuous. So for us, it was really finding a good family routine and rhythm. So I mean, ours is pretty simple. So I wake up first with the boys, the two boys, and I do oatmeal with them. And I just kind of like leave my morning pretty flexible to be with them and around them and start doing my morning routine, like my coffee, my bulletproof coffee, reading my Bible, doing the things like that. And then my wife slowly wakes up and she brings our daughter down, and then we're kind of together for a little bit. And she knows as soon as 8:15 hits, I'm out. I'm like in the shower. I'm doing the rest of my routine. I'm off to work, and then 5:30 I'm home, I'm done, I'm off, and then we eat dinner. And then after dinner, we during dinner or after is when we usually do the Israel family, like ISRAEL, integrity, service, relationships,
love that,
entrepreneurship, leadership. So we walk through that. That honestly, we just implemented that about a week ago, and that's been a huge piece because I think it's allowed us to, number one, it causes us as parents, especially my wife, I notice this a lot for her, where she's often, by the time I'm home, she's a little fried. She's like this in the burner all day. And so
it's like, I tap out, you're in.
Yeah. And so some of like the 3.5-year-old, he doesn't necessarily know how to express that he was abundant for that day, right? Or how he was a leader. But my wife will say, you know what? You were actually a really great leader today when so-and-so came over and you taught him how to use that one toy, right? That's being a leader. That's being an example. And it's interesting noticing her just acknowledging our kids for how they showed up as a leader, as a leader, how her tonality and energy actually starts to shift just by giving the right question to ask, right? So, and then after that, once it hits like 6:30, I leave and I take all 3 kids on a walk by myself. And my wife, I don't even know what she does. She's just alone in the house. Maybe she takes a shower, maybe she sleeps, maybe she's on Instagram, but that's for her to do whatever the heck she wants. And then we come home, I put the boys, bath, put the kids to bed. Then we hang out for the 1 to 3 hours in the end of the evening. So that, as long as like I'm getting my time, she's getting her time, we're getting our time, and then we get our time together, as long as that's happening, life is good. And it's the moment when my normal schedule bumps in, when something else happens that gets thrown off kilter, that's usually where we start to notice the problem. So as much as we can, we try to switch back to that in equilibrium. That's what really helps us.
That's amazing. For those of you just tuning in now, some of you just joining live, like you got to go back and watch this from the beginning. We've got John Israel, speaker, author, founder of the Mr. Thank You Project, and just dropped some amazing nuggets and wisdom on one of the things that helps them stay connected as a family is a daily family schedule. And you guys have heard us talk about that. I love John talking about it though, because they talked about it in a different context than we have. And if you're watching this, please start a watch party, share this live on your page, because the only way we can reach a lot of families is if you're helping us. And one of the things that I love about that, John, is one of the things that we teach in Family Brand is, right, so you have your culture. So we think it's important that families put language to the type of culture they want to create. Like, so in your case, like curiosity. And then another thing that we do in culture, and I'm curious if you and your wife have done any of this, but there's this amazing research out there, John, that shows that one of the greatest indicators of children's future well-being and their identity is actually how much they know about like their ancestors and like their family history and like where they come from. Because it gives them this sense of like being part of something. And then there's the language, mission, vision, values, but then there's this thing called experiences. And in the experiences, we talk about this idea of a connection blueprint. Because what we believe is that every family has like activities that if they just do it, and what you said the line, like word for word, it's like when we just do this, our family just works, right? It's like this recipe that, and every family would look different. Like that recipe for your family and that daily schedule might not work at all for another family. But the power is in coming up with a schedule that just really has your family work, and then activities within that schedule that's like, man, when we do these things. And for us, what was shocking, John, when we put together the connection blueprint for the first time, it was shocking to see how many of these things were just so obvious, but because we hadn't identified them and wrote them down, we weren't being as intentional about doing them. We're like, man, all these things have our family work all the time. Why are we not doing them more often? Well, we've never like created the blueprint, right? But man, as a homeschool family too, when we got on a daily family schedule, it was like, even little things like our kids being like, hey, can I get on the iPad? Can I get on the iPad? Can I, they'll ask you every 5 minutes. Well, now that's built into the daily schedule. So they
Right.
don't have to ask us anymore because they know when they get screen time, or they know when. So that's huge. Okay, well, thank you for allowing me to ask those questions. Every time I ask one of our guests those questions, like so much teaching and learning comes out for everyone watching. So tell us about the thank you project. Like, it's an amazing idea. You wrote, handwritten thank you card, 5 of them every day for a year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So it started as a personal social experiment back in 2016, where, at the time I was a corporate gifting consultant for Cutco knives. So some of you guys are familiar with Cutco kitchen knives. I worked for the brand for 18 years. So I had worked into our corporate gifting consultant, where I work with companies, corporations, to help them with gifting strategies of how they appreciate their favorite clients and employees. And so essentially I was a gratitude salesman. But at the same time, in 2016, I was no longer grateful for my life, or no longer grateful for what I did. And it was just a very busy time. One of the barriers to gratitude is busyness, being too busy, because gratitude by its nature is a reflective state, right? To be grateful, you have to stop what you're doing and actually think about something and then attach positive meaning to it. So it's really hard to do when you're super, super busy. And so I was really busy because at that time we had
Wow.
bought our first house. We bought our first house. My wife was leaving her job to become a stay-at-home mom, which we had talked about, planned on. But then it became a reality. So now I'm like double doing work to really support everybody. And then we find out we're pregnant with our second child. And then on top of that, we were living in Southern California at the time. I get a job offer to move from Southern California to Dallas, Texas. So I was busy and I was stressed. And I was so focused on like work to make money that I just lost all sense of purpose. And that was a really tough time in my sales. And so I was also, I'm a big believer in, I see one of your boards behind you says 100, what does it say? I'm 100% responsible. What does that say?
Be 100% responsible.
Yeah. And so I believe that we're all 100% responsible for our experience of life. And if you don't like how you're feeling, you can choose to change it. And so I was, really did a lot of work, research with like the whole Simon Sinek start with why thing. And I'm a big believer of like, people don't buy what you sell, they buy why you're selling it. So if you aren't getting the results you want, look more internally at your why. And at that time, my why was survival. It was making ends meet. And so my customers could feel that. So I thought, if I get to decide my why, well, why not make it gratitude? That's our business. So we came up with this mission called, that who we are as an organization is about elevating the level of gratitude on the planet, right? And it was very inspiring. It looked great when we put it on the wall, right? But the problem is, and this is what all organizations feel and experience when it comes to actualizing your visions, is, well, how do people feel that? How could I tell that's your corporate vision without you saying to me that's what your vision is? And so I was looking for a way to really embody a practice or a habit of gratitude to really take that on myself. And so I had a great experience of, I was never a big handwritten thank you card person. In the love languages, I'm definitely a words of affirmation type of a guy. So I know it feels good to affirm people. And I also know that for some people, it really is, it's powerful for them. So I said, well, what if that's what I do? For a whole year, I make a commitment to handwrite 5 thank you cards every day for 365 days in a row. And on October 10th of 2016, that's what we did. And I did that for an entire year, and it was changed my life, changed my business, changed our family. It was a really powerful year.
How did it change your life? Like, yeah, so that's amazing to me. I love this idea. If I wrote down, it's hard to be grateful when you're busy.
Yeah.
Like, if there's anyone that feels that pressure, I believe it's families. Like, we are so busy and just spread thin, and like between practices and piano lessons and like things that, like, how did this practice of gratitude and just maybe slowing down, like, how did that help you? Like, what did it do for your family as far as connection or the culture in your home?
So several things. One of them that comes into play for me is learning to experience what you need to experience in order to allow yourself to feel gratitude, because it can be stressful. It can be difficult. So a great example of that is, because here's a question. That sounds great, John, to like write all these thank you cards. What about when you don't feel like it? Because just because I wrote a lot of thank you cards doesn't mean I didn't have traffic. It doesn't mean that my wife and I didn't have our own arguments. It doesn't mean that business was perfect. everything was in fact the same. So how can I allow myself and get myself into a grateful state? And so this is like the example of that. So one particular day I was writing all these thank you cards, and I'm sorry, one particular day before I'd written any cards for the day, I went out to go see clients, and I was gone all day, and it was just an awful day. It was had cancellations, had emails that were like kind of ominous for a business relationship. And there was all these things that were happening that just like by the end of the day, I was just toast. I was drained. I come home and I'm like, you know what? Let me just go home early. I'm going to just knock out my thank you cards and maybe have a beer, hang out with my family, whatever, and relax. And so I come home and I put the key in the door. I was home 30 minutes early, put the key in the door. My dog barks, and which is natural. Dog barks when I do that. But right when I walk in, my dog barks. And then that bark wakes up one of our sleeping children on the couch. So then he starts to scream. And then his screaming wakes up the one that my wife was breastfeeding, putting to sleep. So we've got two screaming children, a barking dog, and then my wife staring at me with like laser beams coming out of her eyes, like burning a hole in my chest. And she's just like, why are you home right now? And I was like, I felt awful. Right. And I'm like, I'm going to go to my office and work on my thank you cards. And it felt gross. I just felt like the worst husband in the world. Like I just ruined my wife's life. Right. So I go upstairs and I'm trying to write these thank you cards. And I literally, Chris, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get a thought or a feeling or emotion of gratitude out because I was so judging myself. I was in such a negative state. I couldn't get myself to be grateful. And that's the whole thing, is you can't be negative and grateful at the same time. And so in that moment, I was like, now here's a piece of the conversation people don't always know. So I had a commitment that for any day that I missed writing 5 thank you cards, I had to donate $1,000 to charity. So it wasn't like I was going to not do it. So I was now in this crucible of like, I had to figure a way. And the only thing that I could think to do was to turn the lights off, lie on the ground, and process the day. And just get into complete silence. And, I like to think of, our thoughts, especially during a very charged emotional day, is kind of like a snow globe. And it's like when you have a really emotional day, it's like you shake it up really hard and it's like you can't even see straight because there's so many emotions that you're feeling that it's hard to really make good decisions. And so in that moment, all I did was I just laid on the ground, processed the day, let all the thoughts kind of like settle down. It took me about 10 minutes. I got up, I grabbed my journal, I wrote down some thoughts, I wrote down some fears. And I always get down to one thing, which is what I say is like, what do I know to be true, right? Is my wife, gonna divorce me? No, she's upset. She'll get over it. Am I a terrible father for waking up my children from a nap? No, they'll be fine. They'll go to sleep soon. Is my business gonna suffer or fail because I had a bad day? No, I'll be fine. I've done this for a long time. And I just got to this like, hey, life's gonna be good. I wrote down a few things I'm grateful for. And then I wrote those cards in like 15 minutes. And it was like, I think that for parents, and this is good lessons for yourself as well as for your children, is to know that at times we need to give ourselves space to process our emotions and to give ourselves the opportunity to experience what's going on so that we can allow ourselves to be fully present with our families. And I think for some people, especially when you have a very busy life or a busy schedule, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're a stay-at-home mom, you're anybody who is just living life, you will have very emotional days, and to know that it's okay and to allow yourself to process the emotions. And I went on to have a great evening with my wife and kids and family, and it was great.
That's awesome.
And that was a really life-changing lesson because I know we're pretty much at time here, but like a year later when this project was done, we had kind of a traumatic experience where we had a miscarriage and we lost a baby. And I'm an entrepreneur, I'm busy, I've never in my life had anything like that happen. I was a wreck. And I was still trying to make business happen and work happen. And I was a mess. It was awful. And I felt terrible trying to work. And fortunately, I had a coach and a mentor at the time that I work with. And he just says, what does John need right now? And I said, I just need to be at home with my family. He's like, then what do you need to do? I was like, I need to clear the deck. I need to cancel every one of my plans, every client appointment, every coaching call, everything. I've just got to cancel it. He's like, okay, do you think they'll understand? And I I'm sure they will. And every person I spoke with, every person I talked to, they were just like, oh my gosh, take care of your family. Don't even worry about it. We'll be fine. And I took like 2 weeks off, and I just was at home. I mourned with my wife, with our children. And I got that lesson because I was trying to write thank you cards every day, because I learned the value of processing emotions and being with what you're feeling.
Wow.
Because if we don't be with those feelings, they can come back. And if we allow ourselves to process it, then we allow ourselves a space to be able to experience the positive emotion of something challenging that happened. And the last thing I'll say with this is the best definition I've learned of the word gratitude is it is the emotion one feels when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. So there's the experience of when you get a gift for your birthday, you might be grateful for it. There's also this ability to look at something and find the gift in it, to find the beauty, to find what's great. And to be able to do that with sometimes a very challenging life experience is very powerful. And so that is something that we really try to live in our family, that if people need space, they need to process emotions, they need to experience what they need to experience, we give them the space to do that. That's myself, that's my wife, and that's what really matters to us.
Dude, that's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing, because it sounds like, although the Mr. Thank You project was an amazing thing, and it was, incredible experience for you and your family and what you've been able to do with in business. I'm almost hearing though, John, that the most powerful, I would have thought you would have said like, oh, the most powerful thing that came out of that was this, like this, this gratitude practice that we do in our home, or this gratitude practice. And maybe you do that, but it actually sounds like that as a result of writing the thank you cards and the Mr. Thank You project and the gratitude, there was actually something maybe even more profound that came out of it for you and your family, was like granting yourself and other people in your family space to just like be with their feelings, be with their emotions, and almost like be who they are, and like that's okay. And we can do that from a place of curiosity and not judgment. Yeah. Like, and that's like, and gratitude is amazing. And I love this idea of how, it's hard to be grateful when you're busy. It's hard to be like, you can't be negative and grateful at the same time. But it was the practice of practicing gratitude and the thank you cards that actually maybe had you get access to something even, I don't want to say more important or more profound, but like different than you maybe were looking for, which is like this idea that, whoa, like if we just slow down in life, which is hard to do as high achieving busy entrepreneurs, right? Like the antidote usually for most entrepreneurs is not take 2 weeks off and go be with your family. And when you say that, I actually think of the quote of, Mother Teresa, if you want to change the world, go home and be with your family. But as entrepreneurs, that's usually not our first thought. Our first thought is like to double down and go all in and like hard charge even more in our business.
Yeah.
But I love that you're saying that, because in kind of the family brand structure, the family brand framework, we believe that a family's brand, and when we roll out, our flagship course, the thing we're going to teach is that it's made up 3 pillars. Like, so a family's brand is made up of culture, language, and experiences. The first pillar though of culture, and it's so funny you're talking about this, is creating space. We have this whole course and modules on what it means to create and hold space for people in a family and in a relationship. And can we really, and like the space is created with love, but it's held without judgment. And what I love about you, it's held by like just being curious and not having judgment. So yeah, man, I'm really grateful for that story, because that's been a huge journey that we've been on, and we're certainly not perfect at it. Like you said, we're striving, but man, if we could really hold space for each other in a family to process what we're feeling and be authentic about what we're feeling and be able to say it out loud without fear of being judged, that kind of space, like anything's possible. Gratitude's possible. Forgiveness is possible. Love is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're talking about in some of the speaking training that I've gone through in facilitation work, one of the greatest things that you need to create as a facilitator or as a speaker, which translates to as a business owner, as a parent, is to create a space of psychological safety, to create a space where people can actually just be themselves and not feel that who I am is wrong, or who I am is not the right person to be in this room, or that I have the wrong thoughts, or maybe, man, this guy's amazing, he's so grateful, I'm not as good as him because I have negative thoughts. Are you kidding me? Why do you think I started this project? Because I had such a hard time with that. And I think that as entrepreneurs and as parents, it's hard because especially when you grow up a lot in the personal development space, right? Which I know you have done quite a bit of work as well as myself. And our marriage is really built a lot within personal development. But your kids haven't been to a Tony Robbins seminar. They don't understand like reframing or any of these other. They're just kids living life. They're human beings, and so what they need is they need space. They need space to learn. They need space to be, because if they don't, and you see behavioral problems, I believe, are a result of a lack of space. They're not allowed to be crazy. They're not allowed to be disruptive because they're still figuring things out. They're figuring their power out. And if we try to control that and bottle it, then it erupts as like, defiance, or erupts as other ways. So those are just our beliefs that we've experienced. And, we're by far not perfect parents, but, we do our best. And that's, I think, some of our core philosophies.
It's amazing. This idea of creating space, it's so profound. Do you have a few more minutes, John?
Sure, go for it.
So this idea of creating space is so profound to us because it's like, we want a family to have, like, we want every family to have like the Israel, right? Like the letters and what they mean and the values, and like created language around like, Israel's are leaders. We have a culture of curiosity, what we stand for, what we're known for, all these things. But all of that language doesn't really do anything if there's not space created inside of that home and that culture for those things to actually be lived, right? Like if there's no space. And one of my favorite lines around this is actually from the movie Avengers Endgame, when Thor goes back to his, have you watched the scene of Endgame?
It's all good. You can tell though.
So Thor kind of loses his way, Thor, like one of the most powerful, like, superheroes of all time. He loses his way and he loses his identity and forgets who he is. And he goes back to his mom in this dream. And his mom says this line that to me, just like, I couldn't stop thinking about it forever. And we teach it in the course, and the line was, she says, "Son, everyone fails at who they're supposed to be." And she said, the true measure of a person, of a hero, is how well they can succeed at being who they already are. And so this idea of like, can we create space in our home for every member of the family to be who they really are, and that they feel safe in that? Like, and what would it look like? Can you imagine like what would be possible in a home where there's a culture that's been created and a brand that's been created where every individual, including the parents, feels safe to be who they really are with no fear of judgment? Like, anything's possible in that kind of space. Like I can show up in this environment, in this space that's been created, and I can be seen, heard, valued for who I really am. And not only is that okay, it's like it's celebrated, like it's embraced. Yeah. And like to the smallest example, my 11-year-old son, since the time he was like, he just never stopped eating with his hands. And it drives me crazy. Cause I'm like, dude, you know how to use a fork and a knife and a spoon, right? But even then, John, he'll just like, he doesn't like just grab, like he'll use one hand with a utensil and uses his fingers. And there's all kinds of reasons it bothers me. One, I think it's gross. Two, it's just like not polite and proper. And honestly, it's probably more my ego, right? Like, what are people going to think of me as his parent? And I just had this epiphany, not even just that long ago. And I was just like, man, what if I just granted him space to just be around that? He knows what I think about it. He knows, but like, why do I have to make him feel like he should be something different around how he eats his food, or he's supposed to be something, even in the small thing like that? And I'm like, and he's kind of on an 11-year track record of doing it. Like he's kind of going to be who he is anyways. And so that's the thing I've also realized is I really think that ultimately our children are going to be who they are. The question is, are they going to be who they are because we've embraced that and fostered that and encouraged that and they have that foundation to build upon? Or are they going to be who they are because they have to do a lot of work later in life to overcome and find out who they really are, right? And so I didn't know where this conversation would go, but I believe so much, because like you said, in my professional life, I believe one of the greatest things that I can do as a coach and as a facilitator, as a speaker, is to create space where people feel safe to come into that space, because if they do, anything's possible. We can create anything with them. But man, what does that look like in homes? And what does that look like in families? And we believe that space is created with love. It's created with no judgment, curiosity. Yeah. It's also created with language. Like hey, here's what Israel's are. Here's what Israel's do. Here's what we stand for. That creates space. And I just love your connection though, of like the gratitude practice is what helped you start to like kind of see like, wow, like when I'm in that moment of gratitude and giving gratitude or just slowing down. Because that's another thing that I've realized the hard way is that one of the things that does not contribute to space, and one of the things that actually maybe causes in our world and our family like a lack of space, is when we're just so busy that there is no time for space. Like when we're so frantically busy. And so, man, I love this conversation. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else you would share, like, you know, that your experiences around the gratitude practice or space that?
Yeah. Well, one thing, and this is like, this wasn't expressed yet, but it's like, you had to say like, what's my greatest goal as a dad and as a husband, right? So it's really simple. My greatest goal is the full expression of my family. And to me, what that means was it took me a while in my life to actually find my voice, to find my gifts, to find my greatest contribution. And the reason why was because I had so much guilt and shame around who actually was the best version of me, who was like a little outspoken, a little bit more like, that's the whole thing is like in all the profile testing that I've been through, like I am best when I'm on a stage. And it's not, and what I learned is like, I used to have a lot of guilt around like, oh, but it's about me. It's about people looking at me. And it's like, what I learned is that it felt, I'm like, yeah, I feel that sometimes, but that's not what's true. Because what's really true is I just want to speak truth to the world. And the best way I can do that is from a stage. And so through my life, I was just constantly like constrained a lot through school, through so many things that I was just not able to feel that. The first time I ever got on a stage was when I was like 21 years old, and I was actually like really good in sales. I was in direct sales, and I was actually one of the best unknowns to me. I was just really good at referral generation with my customers. And so I was asked to give a training on it. And I'm like 21 years old. I'm like, what do I have to teach people about? I'm just, 21-year-old kid. And then it was my first time I got on stage, and I just spoke my truth of what I knew to do, how to treat people, how to build relationships, how to ask for what you want, how to give people what they want to get what you want. And at the end of it, I felt so alive, and I had so many people coming that were like, oh my gosh, it was so great. I learned so many things. This is exactly why I came to this conference. And then I leave and I'm like, it was the first time I got present to like my greatest contribution in the world, like outside of being a father, right? The greatest way that I can use my gifts to contribute to the world. And so I was like, as I developed that gift, what I saw was like, how sad is it that I didn't get to develop this gift earlier on? And so for me, what's really important when I say the full expression of my family is creating the space for them to explore those things and to discover that for themselves. And so that we can foster that as parents and to develop it. We've got a kid right now who's like, we would call him a high emoter, where he's at the 3.5-year-old. He will just scream and cry. But we also see like, dude, this kid is passionate. He has such heart for people, for relationships. Like he's going to be a world changer. So instead of being like, oh my gosh, we have this kid with these behavioral issues, like what drugs can we get him on? It's like, what does this kid need? How can we help him better express his feelings to not be such like a raw, like, like a physical hitting or anything like that, but to like really channel it appropriately to be able to give his gifts to the world. And that's for me, like, that's my greatest goal. Every dollar I make goes back to my family to help support them to become the best versions, the greatest expressions of themselves.
It's amazing. And guys, what you're hearing in that, what John's talking about with his 3.5-year-old son, that's what granting space looks like. It's like, no, like, let's not start to plant these seeds that our 3.5-year-old shouldn't be this way, or he's supposed to be quiet, or he's supposed to be something different. Let's embrace that. And then let's create space for that to like really emerge as a gift. And dude, that's what saved my marriage. Like when I was lost, 10 years ago, and felt like a failure as a husband, as a father, and had failing businesses and owed people money and like completely lost. Dude, it was the space my wife granted me and still saw in me who I really was and what I could be, and believed in me at a time where she had no reason to believe in me. I wasn't worth believing in. She could have judged me and didn't. She could have held things against me and didn't. It was in that space of how she saw me and what I could become that like had me start to see it. It's like the space she granted me saved our marriage, truly, like saved my life. And so it's like, man, I just could talk about this idea of space forever, because it's like in that space, anything's possible. But to John's point, it's like, how many people though, John, because they maybe the home they were raised in And look, this is not like family brand is not about like bashing the family you were raised in or brought up in or your parents. Cause I really believe that most parents are just doing the very best they can and trying as hard as they can. And they love their children. They love each other. And sometimes, those cultures that people are raised in are intentionally created, or they're created by default. But it's like, what would it look like if John, if things would have, and John could have been raised in the most loving home ever. And I'm not saying anything about his parents or the type of home he was raised in, but what if John just could have gotten access to that thought at like 5 instead of like 21? Right. Like, what if John didn't feel this pressure around I got to be who I'm supposed to be or who I should be? What if like from much earlier on, he would have realized like, no, this is who I am. And it's like, it's celebrated. Like I'm encouraged to be that. And so that's the same thing. I love this idea that your greatest goal as a husband, as a father, is full expression of your family. Because look, I believe that most people are ultimately going to find out who they are. It's just, could they find it out at a really young age in our homes and leave with that foundation? Or are they going to have to take a long road getting to it if they ever do, later in life?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, last thing, tell us about Front Row Dads, the hat you're wearing, because you and I are familiar with that organization. John Vroman, the founder, he's going to be on the Connection series.
Cool. Yeah. So the Front Row Dads is a group of entrepreneurial men. So good friends with John Vroman for many, many years. And so he started this group. And actually, so the funny thing is he started the group. The first event we went to live, the first live event in Philly, was like 3 days after the Mr. Thank You project started. Like, no joke, it was like right at the same time.
That's awesome.
And so the group is full of entrepreneurial guys who have a value of, and this is like kind of John's tagline of the organization, of it's not businessmen with families, it's family men with businesses. And it's like, it's a good tagline because it's like, oh yeah, that's right. And then it's like, but is that really how you live? And I think even for me, it's been a challenge. But what's great is that they've got, 2 retreats a year. So we get to go mastermind, hang out with anything from, 30 to 60 dudes at a time. So it's relatively intimate. But I've made some really good friends out of that. And it's been a great group of guys who understand, because fatherhood while being an entrepreneur is a little uniquely different, because you have something almost like where you have 2 families, because it's like birth. Like sometimes if you're an employee, sometimes it can actually be easier to disconnect. Like, hey, it's 9 o'clock or 5 o'clock. I'm done. I leave work. As an entrepreneur, where it's like, that might not be the case. So you got to learn to like literally restructure your life. And that's what we've done the last couple of years. Is I've really restructured my business and my life to be like something that aligns more. And so I think Front Row Dads, just being around a lot of those guys, has really inspired me to do that. And they make some guys in there are doing great. They're killing it in life and in business. And they still have kids who shit their pants. They still have kids who, they have, challenging relationships with. They still have, marriage things that they need to work out, and they're imperfect. And that is very inspiring and helpful to me, to know that I don't need to be perfect to be a parent, and to be a good parent, and to be a good business owner. So they're a great group. So yeah, check them out.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, for those of you just tuning in, I saw we just had a couple people join. Here with John Israel, founder of the the Thank You Project, and just an incredible example and demonstration of being committed to his family. And some of the questions I asked him at the beginning is, what do you want to be known for as a family? And he talked about leadership. I asked him, what do you stand for as a family? And he talked about relationships, and then what's the type of culture you're creating in your home? And it was a culture of curiosity, and just powerful. And then we've talked about what he learned from the Mr. Thank You Project was writing 5 handwritten thank you cards a day for a whole year. What he learned from that was not just the power of gratitude, but it was the power of granting yourself space to really process like your feelings, and granting each member in your family space. And then I just love this idea that your greatest goal as a husband, as father, is full expression for your family. And that maybe your children can start to realize that full expression now and have it forever, and not until they're 21 in life, or like me, until I was in my late 20s. Okay, John, last question I ask all of our guests. All of that said, if there was one piece of advice, could be something you've already said or something totally different, what's something right now, like if you had one piece of advice for families that could make a difference for them in this time, or any time, to just be more connected, what would you share with families?
best piece of advice I would say is there's two things. So that's one, yeah, to answer your question. So it's two things. Which is, part of, when I speak, one of the things I talk about in building quality relationships is every relationship, when you get married, you have a vow, right? You make vows in your marriage. And I think in relationships there, when we have we're present to a vow, we are present to, we can create a better relationship. And I use it as a moniker, or as an acronym, which is values, outcomes, weakness. When you can know what somebody cares about deeply, what really matters to them, when you can know what some of their biggest goals are, and when you can know what they struggle with the most, where their biggest pain is, and you can love on them and serve them through those things, connect with them with what they care about, which might be different from you, really help them achieve a goal that matters to them that might be different from you, and then help them with a pain or a challenge that they struggle with that could be small or big at different times of life. When you can show up for people in that way, you create a really relevant relationship that matters very deeply. And so as a parent, and so it's like, as far as like distilling that to one piece of advice, I would say to honor the tribe you're building, right? And the way you can honor the tribe is to know the tribe, to know them through their values, their goals, and their weaknesses. What do they struggle with? What do they want? And what do they value? And the more you can know that, the better you can really serve and connect your family, because everybody's different. Every child is different. Every spouse is different. Doesn't make them good, bad, right, or wrong. What's there to do is just honor who's in front of you. And if you do, it's amazing how they show up and start to honor you too.
It's amazing. And what I love about that, going back to your goal, that you said the most powerful thing you can do as a family, and the most powerful thing you feel like is to honor the tribe and honor each of them individually for who they are. And that's what I love. This your goal, the greatest goal you have as a husband and father, is full expression of your family. But what I hear in that is like, but that's for every individual in their own way.
Correct.
Right. It's like, and the way that Roan might do it might be totally different than one of your other children might, but that's the point of it. It's like, we're going to celebrate each of you for who you are as you authentically are. And one of the things that we talk a lot about in closing here is that this whole idea of family brand, it is focusing on the family unit, obviously, as a whole, but that within that is really focusing on each individual person in that family to make sure that they're whole. Because this idea, that quote, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, I actually have changed that quote a little bit to where, as it relates to family or teams and cultures, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, so long as each part is whole. Like, the only way to create like a 1 + 1 = 10 in a family is if people who feel whole, people who feel fully expressed, people who've been granted the space to like go after their dreams and like be celebrated for that. So John, man, thank you for your time. Where can our community go learn more about you and your book and just some of the things you're up to?
For sure. Yeah. So the Mr. Thank You Project, you can find it on Amazon. So everything, so the Mr. Thank You Project, a journey to elevate the level of gratitude on the planet, one card at a time. Our mission now, by the way, is to elevate the level of gratitude on the planet by 1% by inspiring 74 million thank you cards written around the world. That is equivalent to 1% of the world's population. And so we've built out MrThankYou.com, which if you go there, you can actually log in for free, create a free account. And then every time you write a thank you card to somebody, you can log it on there. And if you actually put the name and the zip code, we'll track it for you, and we'll give you a global gratitude map, which shows where your gratitude is going around the world. So we actually just had our 10,000th card submitted last week, and so it's really cool to see how
congratulations
all over the US and all over Canada and the world. So so if you want to make that a practice in your life, it's kind of cool. You can go check out, just go to MrThankYou.com, MrThankYou.com, and if you want to pick up the book, it's got a lot of really interesting stories of what one would learn writing 1,825 thank you letters in a single year.
One question I wanted to ask, and I totally forgot. Do you guys have a daily thank you practice or daily, like, do you guys do something around that as a family? Is that an intentional thing for you guys as a family?
The only degree we do that is we have our kid, like at the end of our prayer, right before we eat, we just have everyone say what they're grateful for. So that's like a simple thing. We do actually have it as a family, like just a general family practice, where we have a wall. It's called the gratitude wall. And anytime we have a guest that visits either for dinner or stays overnight, we request that they write what they're grateful for in a Sharpie on our wall. So some people might come
Really?
in the kitchen. Yeah. So literally we have a wall with Sharpie all over it from people all over the country and the world, because we travel a lot. So we actually rent our house on Airbnb. So we've got things written in different languages, and it's actually pretty cool. So we've just made it a commitment that we want to be a space where people can just think about what they're grateful for and what they appreciate. So
that's awesome. Will you send me a picture of that? I'm gonna include it as part of this post. That's cool.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, thank you guys again. So grateful to have John Israel here with us today. Chris Smith here with Family Brand. Please like the Family Brand page. Follow the Connection series. You get to hear from amazing experts and guests like John every single week, and helping families plant their family's flag. Thanks, everybody.